Hi everyone, my name is Seth. I write epic fantasy and science fiction under the pen name SB Sebrick. Welcome to my channel. Today I want to talk a little bit about how indie publishing works. I'm just going to kind of glaze over all of the different steps of the indie publishing process, primarily for writers who have just started working on their first short stories, their first novel, and are kind of trying to decide which way they want to lean. Keep in mind it is possible to use both independent and traditional publishing, as long as you understand certain rules and limitations. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to focus on the process for indie publishing. Step one, of course, is to write the whole project. This is something that I really wish I would have applied in the first couple of years that I started writing, because I got into the habit of writing the novel, publishing the novel, and then writing the next novel in the series and publishing that. And some of the problems that hit me with that was I couldn't, life happens, you know. Over the summer, for example, I was able to get a lot more writing done than I could do during the fall when I was in school. And when you're in that pattern where you're just writing, publishing, that the amount of writing time goes from 3 months to 6 to 9, and you aren't producing novels consistently. One way to overcome that is to make sure that when you're first starting out, you write the entire project. If it's a series of short stories for a collection, you write all the short stories. If it's a series of books, of novels, you write them all. That way, when it's done, you can make sure that you have all the character arcs the way that you want, the endings and the beginnings all line up the way that you want, and then you can produce it as is to readers for their enjoyment. So step one, of course, is to write the book. Second, you want to find what's called a first reader, and that is someone who really is profoundly interested in the genre you're writing in. For example, I have an aunt who's a fantasy addict. She reads a fantasy novel a week. She's been doing that for years. So if I was to write a zombie book and ask her to be the first reader, that might not be the best idea, because post-apocalyptic isn't really her thing. But if I do an epic fantasy and I'm doing a coming-of-age story that's kind of in the same spirit as The Wheel of Time or some of Brandon Sanderson's stuff, that would be a really good project for her to read and critique. And her critique, obviously, if I'm making grammar and spelling errors that pull her out of the story, I'll want her to mention those. But primarily, the first reader is to look at the story itself. Are you being true to the genre? Are you meeting readers' expectations? Are you not delivering on what needs to be done? For example, if I was writing a romance and I killed off the love interest at the end, a first reader in romance could come to me and say, oh, no, 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 no. If you do this, this is no longer a romance. If you do this, this becomes a fantasy or sci-fi or whatever some of the other genres are. But someone who's been reading romance for years will know that you do not kill off the love interest in a romance. That's cutting off your legs when you're trying to run a mile. That does not work. So another word for that kind of editing is called content editing. Editors often offer themselves for content editing. You need to be careful if you decide to hire an editor as a content editor, because that level of editing requires knowing that genre backwards and forwards. That's why it works just as well to grab a reader that profoundly loves romances or epic fantasy, and making sure that your story fits into that genre. It can be easy to fall into the trap of hiring an editor who just got out of college, who just got their editing degree, so they're charging really low rates because they're trying to build a portfolio, and they try and give you a content edit of your story, when the editing that they've been given, the training that they've been given, came from a professor of English who couldn't make a living with his fiction and therefore became a teacher. Now, after you find that content editing, whether by finding a really talented editor or a really dedicated first reader, then you need a proofreader. And that's also called line editing, which is someone that looks for the grammar and the spelling problems. Someone that goes in line by line and makes sure everything lines up and there aren't any grammatical mistakes that are going to pull your reader out of the story. That you can definitely hire an editor to do, because at least for me, I'm not a nitpicky type of personality. I can't open up a story and go into the right kind of there and the prepositional phrases and the right verb conjunctions and making sure it all lines up. I have to hire a proofreader to go through my story and find those, because once I start writing a story, I see the story, I don't see the words anymore. Most of us are like that. In fact, most writers I've talked to say that even if you've got a good sense of story, even if you know your genre, you still have to hire a proofreader, because that's one of the things that your brain just can't do on its own. If you are on a budget though and you can't hire a proofreader, you can get beta readers, which are other people that really enjoy your work, that are willing to read your stories, and you just ask them to highlight anything that takes them out of the story. So if it's a character that's acting out of character, if it's a grammar problem, a spelling problem, they just highlight it, make a little note, send it back to you, and that's another way that you can get a lot of proofreading done, particularly if you have 5 to 10 beta readers. It's debatable whether 10 beta readers are as good as one paid editor, but obviously if you're on a budget and you have financial limitations, there's only so much you can do. But if you only have a limited amount of money and you can only put it into one thing, I would recommend proofreading, because making sure that that story flows grammatically is one of your strongest bets towards keeping readers in your story. Once you've got the editing done, you have the content editing, the line editing, the next step is to give your story a face, and that is a book cover. Now, a couple things you need to be aware of. Just because an artist is good at creating art does not right away mean that that artist can create a book cover. A book cover is the face of your story. You want to make sure that the message that that cover sends, the emotions that that cover creates, match your story. I heard a horror story last year at Oricon about a writer who had a friend who was an artist, and she was working on a paranormal fantasy. And the two main characters were brothers, and they were werewolves. So the artist put a full blood red moon in the background, in the woods, with two half-naked guys. And for those of you that are trying to picture what genre two half-naked guys would go into under a blood-soaked moon, it's not paranormal fantasy at all. The art was beautiful, and the art would sell as a piece of art, but it did not match the genre of her story, and therefore it wouldn't have been a good choice for her book cover. So you need to be aware of those differences between just designing a pretty piece of art and creating the face of your story. Once you have that cover set up, you can either hire an artist or you can learn to do it yourself. I will have videos in the future on both of those options. You will need to write your sales copy. Sales copy is a little different. That's like the blurb that goes on the back of your book. That's to reel in readers. Best way you can learn how to do that is to go to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, and start reading. Look at other books in your genre, the ones that are selling really well. Read those blurbs and look at how they're designed. Look at what elements of the story they're selling and what's bringing in readers, and see if you have similar veins in your stories that you can bring to life that are built like that. One example of a quality blurb that I'll always remember was from one of Stephen King's books called Misery. It's about a writer who is in an accident and he's saved by a fan, but the fan is legitimately insane. She's crazy. And the way that they did the blurb was beautiful, because it said, like, and if he doesn't do what Nancy wants, she has a bucket of soap. And if he still doesn't do what she wants, she has a hammer. And if he still doesn't do what she wants, she has a needle. And if he still doesn't do what she wants, then she gets really nasty. And it left this kind of morbid curiosity that I bought the book right then and there, because I had to know what else this crazy woman was going to be able to unleash in this book. And those are the kind of blurbs you want to go for, the ones that leave the readers with questions, that leave them wanting to know more about the story. You want to make sure you don't start just rattling off plot points or summarizing the opening scene of the book. Once you've got the sales copy written, so what will go on the back of the book, you'll want to look at what's called the front matter and the back matter. I've talked about this a little bit in previous videos. The front matter is what immediately opens up on the first page. So that's your title page, your copyright page, author dedication. I like to put in an invitation to subscribe to my newsletter right there. I put it in the front matter and the back matter because sometimes readers need a second viewing of an ad before they'll click it. And subscribing to my newsletter is one of the main things I'm really trying to focus on right now. Back matter has a lot of the same things with an invitation to subscribe. You'll also want an About the Author page. Once you've gotten some more titles up, you'll have other titles by your pen name. It's also good to put in like a sample of a novel or maybe even a free short story, something to give the book extra value. At that point, you will have a complete novel. You will have a cover, you will have a blurb, you will have an edited interior, and then you can upload that yourself to Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Smashwords, Draft Digital. All of those you can upload for free. It doesn't cost you anything, and most of them will give you about 70% royalties on any sales you make from any of those retailers. After that, once it's uploaded and available for purchase, then you can start working with your readers to promote your work, to keep building that mailing list and finding more ways to get your name out there and to bring in more readers. So that's kind of an overview of how independent publishing works. If you have any other questions on what it takes to get into independent publishing or things that you want to have resolved as you're trying to decide whether you can handle it yourself, feel free to leave those questions and comments down below. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. It's a great way to let me know you guys are interested in the content that I'm putting out. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you later.